This is the Holy Gospel according to Mark, beginning at chapter 1 and verse 29. And I'm reading here from the Message version. Directly on leaving the meeting place, Jesus and the disciples came to Simon and Andrew's house, accompanied by James and John. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed, burning up with fever. They told Jesus, and he went to her, took her hand, and raised her up. No sooner had the fever left than she was up fixing dinner for them. That evening, after the sun was down, they brought sick and evil-afflicted people to Jesus. The whole city lined up at his door. He cured their sick bodies and cured their tormented spirits. Because the demons knew Jesus' true identity, he did not let them say a word. While it was still night, way before dawn, he got up and went out to a secluded spot and prayed. Simon and those who had been with him went looking for him. They found him and said, "Everybody's looking for you." Jesus said, "Let us go to the rest of the villages, so I can preach there also. This is why I've come." He went out to their meeting places all through Galilee, preaching and throwing out demons. Here ends the reading. One of the things that's been on my mind lately is this idea of connections. And I've realized, at least for myself, that sometimes I have problems voicing connections. So I might be talking about a 3-step plan. And I might talk about steps 1 and 3, but I forget to mention step 2. And instead I rely on others to connect the dots or make that own connection in their mind. And it can be a little frustrating, I can imagine. Hopefully this sermon allows the gospel to make that connection with you. And it doesn't get caught up with me forgetting to make the connections. As I looked at the gospel reading for this week, one of the neat things was that there's a connection between this week's reading and last week's reading. Well, it's because they're back to back. But one of those other connections is we hear about the mother-in-law of Simon. She's never given a name. We just know her as the mother-in-law. And just like last week with the person with the unclean spirit, is never given a name, but yet they play a major role in the story, just like each of us can. But that was last week. So looking at this week, one of the things that stuck out to me is the way that Mark makes these problems and then has solutions. He makes a connection between the problems and the solutions. So there's 3 problems that all have the same word structure in the Greek. One of those is what happens with the mother-in-law of Simon. She's in bed, and the Greek translation to English is basically she's fevering. And as the story goes on, we hear about those possessed by demons. It's actually like they are being possessed by demons. That's actively happening. And then we hear it later on with all of the people who are being sick are brought to the doorstep of where Jesus is at. So the people who are being sick, the people who are experiencing demons, and the mother-in-law of Simon who is fevering. So those are the problems. And the solution ends up at the very end of today's reading, as Jesus went out through all of Galilee, preaching and casting out demons. Preaching and casting out demons. It's the same tense. And it makes this neat connection with the 3 ailments the mother-in-law fevering, the people being possessed by demons, and those being sick, they are healed by Jesus with the preaching and the casting out of demons. Jesus makes that connection. So I think about some of us, and it raises the question, where are those connections in our lives? And I had trouble thinking of examples until I went back to Mark. And I realized Mark invites us into the story to be an active part of this living story. We can always add an ing to the function. Just like what's happening in the reading, we can add an ing to the story. We can add that we are living in a real story. We are living our own lives. And just like Mark's story, Jesus can't do all the healing and the casting out of demons all by himself. He empowers others. He enables others to do that same ministry with him. And likewise, he invites us to be an active part of that ongoing healing and casting out of demons. Jesus invites us to follow him in that healing journey, in that healing process. So then I thought about us and our own lives. And I got to thinking about teachers. And one idea about teachers is that they have all the knowledge, and their job is to pass that knowledge on to students. But the problem with that is that sometimes the teacher isn't able to make that connection. Sometimes the teacher isn't always able to be there to pass that knowledge on. And sometimes we just forget what the teacher taught us. And that's when another style of teaching can be more helpful. A style of teaching that empowers us or enables us. And that style of teaching might be when the teacher shows us what the best learning method is for us and how we can learn. So the teacher actually empowers us so that even when she or he is not around, we can still learn. And we're able to make that connection. So a teacher might be someone that makes that connection. Another person that's on my mind are doctors. Doctors, of course, have studied medicine. They've spent years studying all of this so that we can go to them with our ailments, just like in the story, and they can provide healing. But one of the neat things that happens with doctors a lot of times is they do their best to empower us to help do that healing in our own life so that we don't have to go to them for all the answers. So they encourage us to eat healthy and to exercise and, all of the stuff that we're told by doctors that we should do. But in a way, it's a way of empowering us to make those connections, just like in the story. Another group of people I'm thinking about are students. Students are called by Jesus to make those connections. And you might say that the job of a student is to, sit there and learn all the information that's being passed on to them. But maybe a better understanding of a student is to take some of the knowledge and experience that's being revealed to them and making that connection within their own life. So that when they're outside of the classroom, when they're in other places, they can continue learning. They can continue empowering others to learn from them as well. And so their students are called to be people who make that connection. We have a problem, we have that connection piece, and then we have a solution. But what happens when we don't feel like making a connection? What happens when we struggle to feel connected? When we don't feel empowered? That's when I'm reminded of the cross. Sometimes we struggle. Sometimes we are just like Simon's mother-in-law. We're fevering. And we even feel like death has a grip on us, and we don't feel empowered. But that's where Jesus comes into play again. Jesus on the cross has made that connection from death into life. The cross is that connecting point that connects death to life. That cross brings us into Jesus' life, brings us into Jesus' ministry, and empowers us to be a connection, especially when we don't think of ourselves as a person worthy of making connections. This week, as you go out into whatever your role is, whether you're a teacher, a student, whatever your occupation is, I hope and pray that you may see yourself, just like last week, in God's story, and that you may see yourself following in the footsteps of Jesus and making those connections for others. Because just as Jesus has connected death to life, Jesus empowers each one of us to make those connections for ourselves and for the people around us. And even when we struggle to make those connections, God will always be there, connecting with us. Amen.